I know, I heard that twittering. All right, hi everybody. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Snack and Chat, Adopt for Life's weekly Facebook Live, where we explore the topics that are top of mind for families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce my guest, Angela Geddes. I'm pronouncing that right. I forgot to ask you. I usually like to check that. So you'll interrupt me if I'm pronouncing your name improperly. She's here and we're going to talk about FASD supports, and we're also going to talk about her book, A Complicated and Beautiful Brain. My name is Chantal, Community Engagement Liaison with Adopt for Life. I am going to begin with a land acknowledgement. So I do want to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on. While we meet on a virtual platform, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of those lands, which we each call home, wherever we are tuning in from. For myself, I reside on unceded Algonquin Anishinaabe territory. We do this acknowledgement to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations, and as a first step towards improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. So if you wish to, I'll invite you to join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and to consider how we are and can each in our own way action forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So whether you're tuning in live or maybe you're watching this later on replay, I want to thank you for taking time to tune in and be with us, because I know time is a precious commodity. So if you are here live or on replay, you can ask your questions, add your comments in the chat. We do love to hear from you and to let us know that you're with us and listening in. I will remind you that this is being live streamed on our public Facebook page. So what that means is that whatever you're putting in the comments is something that's going to be available to the public. So if you're asking a question or putting in a comment about your child, so please do not include any identifiable information when discussing your children. So just keep that in mind. As I said, we love to hear from you. So let us know if you have any questions for Angela or any comments. And we hope that you find this discussion informative and engaging. Now we have a lot of questions. I just want to do a quick intro for Angela. Angela, I'm sure many of you already know her, but she is a social worker in private practice with over 25 years of experience supporting individuals and families with complicated mental health and learning challenges in a variety of settings. She has a particular interest in FASD and has continued her research, both formal and informal, dedicated to understanding what FASD looks like across the lifespan and across sectors from the family and frontline perspective. She recently authored a book titled A Complicated and Beautiful Brain to help deepen understanding of the condition itself, reduce the stigma, and to highlight how many missed ones there are out there who are struggling to be better understood. Her focus today is to work towards reducing both the impact and the incidence of alcohol-exposed pregnancies. So a warm welcome to you, Angela. Thank you so much for being here and joining us on Tuesday Lunch Snack and Chat.
An honor to be here.
So like I mentioned in the intro, we have a lot of questions. So if you're good, we're just gonna jump in. All right, awesome. So I just read your bio. So we just heard that you have this interest in FASD and have done in both informal, formal research. So maybe you could share with us like how this special interest came to be.
Well, it was really kind of fascinating because my very first little clinical experience ever as a child and youth worker was with a little person who had fetal alcohol syndrome, which was the diagnostic term at the time, that reflected his significant physiological and developmental needs at the time. So he appeared to be quite quite tiny, and he had, you know, full facial features and was developmentally quite behind. So in other words, he was 8 years old and in a kindergarten program. So I often say that, you know, the bad news was he was exposed to an awful lot of alcohol to create that condition. But the good news was he was exposed to a lot of alcohol that made his disability more visible. So we were able, the community, everybody was able to wrap around him without judgment and without any bias, or, you know, we just knew that this family needed to be supported in a really good way. So so that's how I was introduced to it. And so again, the good news was I was introduced, and I was early on in my career was very imprinted with the role that alcohol can play during pregnancy. However, I was a bit misinformed because at the time I felt like it took a lot of alcohol to create the kind of circumstances that I was seeing with this little person. So when you fast forward my career that went from, you know, working at a local children's mental health agency, then to working in the school system, working in facilities for young offenders at the time, and various group homes and receiving and assessment homes, there were a number of kids who now I'm quite certain were exposed prenatally to alcohol, but we just didn't know it. So um, then I became involved with a local group here in the London area, which was FASD, Elgin, London, Middlesex, Oxford, which short forms into ELMO. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's a small group that was founded by Tracy Grant, and I got bit by that, you know, awareness and prevention and advocacy bug. So and then I was working at a community health center at the time where we were funded specifically to support families who were at risk, you know, younger moms potentially, single parents potentially, people who had issues with our social determinants of health. So lack of education, lack of opportunities, transportation, isolation, those kinds of things. So we had a really, really neat group that parents would come to see us on a regular basis. And you know, it wasn't long to figure out that many of our families, you know, used alcohol in their social lives, and lots of times pregnancies were unplanned. So
Yeah.
there were, you know, circumstances. So that just sort of built and built and built. And once you get into it and you see what this looks like from the front line, it's hard to you can't unlearn it, right? And you just know that our system isn't being inclusive. So from there, I decided to get my master's degree, which requires research, which why not, you know, further it in an area that I'm really interested in. And at the time I was coordinating a pilot project in the London area for assessment and diagnostic services. So it just really fit, you know, nicely together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm getting some feedback there. Was that me or you? I'm not
You know
sure.
what? I need to probably, I think I just got a notification, so I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that's what that was. Okay, no big deal. Yeah, amazing experience and breadth of knowledge that you've probably gained over the last 25 years. So let's segue into the book. Like, was this something that as you were learning more and more through the years thinking, oh, you know what, I need to write a book? Or did it just like, how did the book come to be?
Well, yeah, I didn't really think about writing a book. I did often think about standing on top of tall mountains and yelling at, I did think about
Maybe
that.
not as effective as the book.
No, no. So yeah, I thought people might wonder about that. But then I when I was doing my master's, to be honest with you, I really what I wanted to do was develop curriculum for Fanshawe College and just deliver it there. But I had previously been a professor, a part-time professor, so my supervisors didn't think that I would learn enough. So then they encouraged me to develop a thesis, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to do this. This is a lot of writing, a lot of reading, tiny little journal articles. But anyway, so I did. I decided to take that leap. And then once I did that, I realized that there were a number of gaps in our service delivery and just our general understanding. Like I think most providers know a little bit about FASD, but it's really not part of our curriculum and it's really not part of our understanding. So my thesis focused on building assessment services, assessment and support services across Ontario. I researched at the time 5 different ministries and what I refer to as their brag books. So in other words, what they say they want to do, right, for everyone who comes in. And there were a lot of common themes that I was able to grab onto. And then I looked at what FASD looks like across the lifespan, and where those things could intersect, and where we could just not create new services all the time, but to build capacity so that there are fewer wrong doors. And that was my goal. And so from there was this really cool package that, you know, I kind of had some of it together around what does it look like across the lifespan that I thought people would appreciate. But it's really interesting because my professor at the time when I finished my thesis, she said, I look forward to your book and I want a signed copy. And I was like, are you out of your mind? Like, I'm not even joking. And that I just like, once I was finished with this, I thought, I can't do any more of this writing right now. I
Yeah.
think or my family would have a revolt, right? They needed, yeah. So anyways, but then it came around and it was just like, I have her to thank for just planting that seed, I suppose, and recognizing that I had information that was worthy to share.
That's right. Very worthy.
Yeah.
So that definitely segues great into my next question. So who should, I mean, obviously there's across the gamut, people can get a lot of information from this book. So is it written for professionals? Is it written for parents? Is it really accessible for all people?
I actually wrote it to be accessible to all.
Okay.
In other words, if you are an adult who you are questioning what's going on with yourself, it's written in a way that promotes dignity and furthers understanding of what some of these complex mental health. I'm sorry, I should have it on do not disturb. And I can't figure out how to do that right now. So anyway, so it's written so that anybody could read it and deepen their understanding. And with throughout the book, there are links and QR codes that take you further. So they take you to documents, to PDF files, to websites, and to YouTube versions that can help you, you know, do further investigation.
That's really interesting. So the e-copy, you can go from there straight and start digging into an area of research that you want to know more about.
Yeah, so even in this one, so see, in this copy here, which is
Yeah. Oh, and you can just scan the QR code.
Scan the QR code and it hops you right wherever you want to go. So it's kind of, you know, full of that, but then written with a number of case studies and examples and things that I have learned over the years. And as I've often said, if you've ever heard me speak, I mean, I've written, obviously I've written a book, I've read a lot of journal articles, that I can guarantee you. But the most meaningful learning that I've ever had are from people who experience this every day. So from a caregiver's perspective and from individuals who live it. Like I'm constantly learning about, oh, you know, that makes so much more sense now, right? And yeah. So
Yeah, 100%. I think hearing from those that lived that experience, you gain so much knowledge. Yeah.
yes, and what this really looks like. And I think that's one of the things that I can bring to the table too, because while I was doing my thesis, well, as soon as I finished it, I guess, I took a few contract positions. And I can remember my sister saying to me, you know, you got to stay at your job. Like, you can't keep taking these short-term positions. People are going to look at you and think you're not committed. And I'm like, I can make the argument. I did it. I go into it very clearly. I'm taking a 6-month contract in medicine. I'm taking a 6-month contract over here in with the assertive community mental health team, for example, working with the seriously ill in the community. And I did that because I wanted to provide good services, obviously, but I also wanted to see what this looks like and how many. So for example, when I worked at in community mental health with some of our most vulnerable, we would do rounds every day where we describe, you know, what's happening. And so, I mean, this is just from a screening perspective, but I would bet a lot of money that at least 40% of the people that we were supporting actually had a complex neurodevelopmental disorder, likely related to prenatal alcohol exposure. But we were seeing them through just a variety of mental health disorders, and like a number of them, with multiple medications and things that weren't working as well as maybe they could have.
Mhm.
I saw outcomes improve, but I still saw resistance within our system in their ability to do things differently, so.
Yeah, and I'm sure that now, gives you all these different lenses to see, right? Because you have experience in working in all these different,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I've worked in it.
You do hear that often. What do you mean you're changing? You should be staying with the same.
Yeah, it was all very strategic, and here I am
Yeah.
in my own private practice doing what I know I need to be doing. So this is exactly where I need to be.
Yeah. So like I said earlier, we had a lot of questions from parents. So if we're going to switch gears a little bit, we're going to come back near the end and talk a little bit more about the book and how people can get their hands on it if they want to have a copy. So if you're just tuning in, we're live with Angela Geddes. We're talking about FASD. So if you do have a question or a comment, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll do our best to get back to you. Might not be right away during the live, but we will get your questions answered for sure. So first question is suggestion for parents or caregivers on how to support their child with FASD in helping them find their strengths. So how parents can help support and cultivate those strengths.
Well,
Kind of like a really big, vague question, but we can start there and go from there.
well, I think it's critical. I think it's critical for all of us, right, to be doing something that we find meaningful and something that we're good at. Because when we're constantly forced into situations that we're not feeling comfortable, it eats away at our view of ourself and our view of the world and our position within it. So I think it's really, really important. And I think it's been my experience that, individuals with complicated and beautiful brains, which is what I refer to it rather than always talking about FASD, there's a lot of strengths. There's a lot of gifts, I would argue, right? There's a lot of creativity. There's usually a level of tolerance that we don't see in mainstream communities. There's a new day and an ability to live in the moment that the rest of us could learn from, so there's all kinds of strengths. And I just think it's so important because sometimes we end up pushing on a rope and expecting kids to, or young people and young adults to be doing things that are just not within their wheelhouse. So let's find a circle of support and work on acceptance of all the things that are beautiful about us, but all the things that are justifiably complicated. Because putting our head in the sand and ignoring it creates, a lot of difficulties. And I see often that, the high school is fairly well supported, but then when we move on to that post-secondary education, people feel like they're ready to be launched. And in our efforts as parents to promote this independence and this self-esteem, sometimes we inadvertently create false hope for the kind of success that they're expecting, independent of the support system that could be available.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Because we're going to talk about that. I think that's might be their next question. So, because we have, when talk about FASD back in September when we had our full campaign, I know that was a question that came up a lot from our communities, supports really lacking in the adult sphere. So once they move out of high school.
Yes, I think I jumped and melded two questions together there. Sorry.
Perfectly fine. So I think you jumped. It's a perfect segue. So what, in your opinion, are important strategies then or initiatives in helping those teens as they transition to adulthood?
Well, I think the most important thing that the most beneficial, I suppose, thing that we can do is really focus on that acceptance and really helping individuals understand the implications of their complicated brain in whatever language, people want to use. And I know that, there's a lot of people that just want to be normal, right? They don't want to hear about what's wrong with them all the time. And so I'm really, really cognizant of that. But yet, I think that normalizing unusual circumstances by allowing people to understand that other people experience this too. So, in other words, a therapist that gets FASD or a support group that gets, these complicated situations, I think can be really, really critical because it allows individuals to feel like it's okay to ask for and rely on some of that support that's required. And I think the people that have the most difficulties are the ones that are resistant to that, and really lack the understanding of what is going on with them, right? And I think what happens is, and again, I keep learning, I keep learning every single day, but what I see happen is that individuals do things that are out of character, so, or outside of their values. Okay, so I do a lot of work on acceptance commitment therapy and training, for example. And I think that what I've learned is that when we are behaving or when we do something that's not in line with our values, that's where we struggle, right? So, and I mean, that can be simple. Like if you have an argument with your partner, and you will become probably more upset with your behavior in that than the way that somebody else responded to you, right? So, what eats you up or what keeps you up at night? So, imagine a young person who lashes out at his mother or at his dog or at somebody and does things that go like what, like they even surprise themselves sometimes because their impulse control is not as good, right? I had a young person say to me the other day, I was explaining the role of impulse control in his circumstances, and he totally agreed. It was so funny. So I said, I don't think that impulse control button works all the time, and we were just talking about that, and he says, yeah. He said, it's glitchy. I just thought it was like the best way to describe what's happening because sometimes it's on point and sometimes it's not. So those conversations, so that it takes that responsibility not away from the individual, but helps them to rationalize and rather than just think that they're bad people because they do bad things. I think that's the greatest gift that we can give people
Mhm.
is to provide an environment and an understanding that this is the way their brain works when this is happening. So how can we adjust this, and this to make this not happen?
Right.
Um, so yeah, I told
I
you.
really like the way that you explain that, like within the context of a relationship or like when you have that argument and it's true, like you're always, well, not always, and not everybody feels it, but you tend to ruminate or feel bad about your own actions and what you said as opposed to,
Right. And you try to rationalize it, right? You try to figure it out and you try to, well, why did he make me that mad? Or why did he? And so then you kind of, yeah. And I think our young people or even our older people, they beat themselves up on a regular basis because they're, like I said, they're surprised by what they do. And they think that, well, if I do that, I must be a bad person. And
yeah.
I was working with a young person one time and he said, well, if I said it, I meant it because I'm not lying. Like I said it, so I mean it. And I'm trying to say, but I don't think that's something that you wanted to say. Yes, in that moment, that's what you were feeling. But upon reflection,
Hmm.
you wanted to say it. And now that you know more information, that's not how you feel anymore. So we have to help that impulsivity, right? In order to be more in line with your values and who you are as a person.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, well, let's talk more about impulsivity, but we have so many questions that parents, but I'm going to make a note because I do want to talk more about that and what that means and how do parents help their children regulate that impulse, that glitchy impulse button.
Mhm. That's another book.
Yeah, wow. So here's a question from someone in our community who they say, I'm an adoptive parent to a child with FASD, and there are days where I feel very overwhelmed with the level of advocacy needed and often feel alone in this battle. Any suggestions on how to stay engaged and passionate or to feel less isolated?
Well, I think that's a real tough one, and I see it all the time. I really believe that we all need a winger once in a while. If you're a hockey mom or a hockey, I'm a ringette player. We need helpers, and I say that all the time. We all need helpers, and I feel like part of my role is to walk alongside families. So I'm not looking for work here. This is not what I'm saying, but I attend meetings all the time with my families because, even going to a meeting with the school, I know that parents can be misread and misunderstood. And in fairness to the school system, I think parents have to advocate and fight for everything, that sometimes they legitimately go with a chip on their shoulder and they don't hear things clearly. And I'm not blaming. I certainly understand all of that, but there is this dynamic. And so sometimes I'm that middle person. So I don't suggest it's me. I suggest it's somebody, right, that can walk alongside to help, manage the emotional piece of it and bridge those things. But I also think that it is exhausting. And I've been working, as I said, in this field for 25 years. I've never seen a condition so misunderstood and so dismissed, and parents feeling so alone. And it just breaks my heart and continues to inspire me and motivate me to do more. So I would encourage you to find your people, and support groups, and that's another part of the reason why I wrote the book. And I know this sounds like a sales pitch, but it's not. But it's the reason why I wrote it is because you can bring it with you, to books or to meetings, pardon me, and say, look at, this is what it looks like. This is what my son or my daughter is experiencing right now, and this is what we need to consider this in our support. And I don't have all the answers written in that book, that's for sure, but it's to discuss it and to have conversations because everybody is unique, right? So what's going to work for your little one may be different than this one, but if we come from that place, then we can be creative.
Absolutely. And I do know here at Adopt for Life that we do have some on-demand resources too. So if you are wanting to, point someone in your school, an educator in direction on what they can learn, there are some on-demand webinars about FASD specifically aimed at educators, which is fantastic. And if you are in the community, in the parent-to-parent network, you can reach out to your RPL. That is literally your wing person for things like this. So don't hesitate to reach out to your regional parent liaison if you need additional advocacy, even just someone there just keep you on point. Because it can be emotional too in those times.
It can be, and I know that, I've run a lot of support groups, facilitated many, and I think some parents hate the word self-care because there seems to be no time for it and, all of that stuff. But I do encourage people to do whatever it is they can to remember that, their needs are really important too. And when we talk about safety, we talk about safety for everyone in the family, right? So, and that includes emotional safety.
Mm-hmm.
We need to consider that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I usually tend to ask that question in many of my snack and chats about, self-care, because it is a lot of parents and caregivers in this realm, like they feel burnout a lot. And I know you're right. Like a lot of people, when they hear the word self-care, their back immediately goes up, right? Because I don't have time, which
Right.
I understand, but
Self-care
call it something else. Call it something else.
doesn't involve a trip to the spa all the time, right? It
Oh,
doesn't mean that at all, but it means, your favorite cup of tea in 10 minutes to get yourself together and to remind yourself of all the things that you've done really well and how hard you're working and who's in your life that, I really believe that amongst the chaos, we can still find these pockets and moments of beautiful and peace, right?
I
It's
agree.
hard. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, I like this question. If you had to put together a toolbox for a child with FASD or youth on learning how to self-advocate, what would be in that toolbox?
Hmm. Well, I think I touched on it earlier around the earlier a diagnosis. I think one of the benefits to the early identification, even if we can't get a diagnosis, but that early identification of how our brains and our bodies work differently, I think that's really, really important. It allows that acceptance to happen and conversations to continue around what my needs are. So I actually have helped to develop a childbirth tool, which is aimed at obviously older people who are having a baby. But part of that, the rationale behind that was, it's not for people specifically with FASD, but it is. But we're recognizing that a lot of people are having babies that don't have a clue they have FASD, but they're bothered by beeping sounds, by bright lights, by surprise visits by a physician, by facial expressions, by, touch, all of those things, right? So it's kind of like a checklist of what kinds of things, I get anxious when, or I need a support person when, or I need, to be able to speak to somebody about this. So it allows people to kind of go through and look at what makes them tick. So I'm looking at building more of those so that people can identify even without, what kinds of things make me comfortable and what makes me uncomfortable in a variety of different situations. So I think as parents and caregivers, we can do that for our young people at an early age. This is really hard for you, like tags on the back of your, the back of your sweaters and socks. I have one mom that literally every morning before the little guy went to school, she put his clothes in the dryer to warm them up for him. And that's how he got ready for school. And that was something that made that part of his day better. Right. So it's just little things like that. Whereas other people don't like feeling hot and warm, so it's just whatever works, but having people aware of what's theirs to own and what's not, what's not theirs. So being really positive about it. I always, and I find this really effective, but I nobody likes to be a topic of conversation. Everybody likes to be a part of a conversation. So within reason, but I would encourage always to have your little people or your young people or your older people, whoever, part of the conversations around what's going on and what we need and what would be most helpful. I think that's really important. So to engage in that kind of problem solving together, trying to focus on the strengths so that you can speak with ease, like I know that I'm not really that good at keeping up with my bookkeeping, for example. I might not bill for a month, that's just not my thing. I don't like to do it. I like to talk and support people. I want help with that. Even there's other things. So I think the earlier people know that this is what I'm really good at and I kind of suck at this and I do better and it's okay. We don't have to be good at everything. So I think those are the things that I would put in people's toolboxes.
Those are all great ideas. And I remember talking about this and we had a parent and her suggestion or what she did at the start of every meeting, if she was meeting new teachers or what, she always started with her child's strengths. My child's really good at this. And that sort of to set the tone, right? And not start with maybe the triggers or the things that cause disruption for that person.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I had a follow up about like what would you put in the toolbox for caregivers, and I kind of said, hey, this is like maybe the new term for self-care. Like get yourself a toolbox and think about it, right? Take that time and think, what would I put in my toolbox that would help,
And I think pre-planning does a lot, and I know that we're often a very reactive bunch, right? Like we respond to things that are happening because we're always putting out fires and we're always, on edge kind of thing. But I think that focusing on small wins and re-examining, like what the main thing that I'd put in your toolbox around self-advocacy is just being able to think outside the box and revisit these rules that we all have in our heads and say, do they really make sense? Do we have to be listening to our parents or our grandparents around what we should be doing at the dinner table? Why do we all have to sit around the tree and open our presents all at once if it ends up with somebody, with something wrapped around their head at the end of the day, like if it's not successful, and then build on. So if siblings are never getting along, well, why don't we try 5-minute intervals? Why don't we try and then interject while things are good to move to the next stage, right? Like look for those moments and then just like be really pleasant around it, and then, hey, I need help with this, or we need to transition to this, or whatever it is, so that the world could be full of more successful experiences rather than.
Yeah, I remember this reminds me of a conversation I had another snack and chat about I'm not even, it wasn't really even about FASD, but it was about setting expectations, right? So, the example was, if sitting at the dinner table is the issue you want to focus on, instead of making it every day you have to sit at the table, the expectation is, okay, like once a week, we're going to sit for 15 minutes, so just adjusting the expectations.
Mm-hmm. And having kids a part of I know when my parent or my kids were younger, I would always have a meeting on Sunday nights so that we'd kind of have an idea of what we were doing for the week ahead, and we'd plan our menu, and each of the kids would get a chance to plan their favorite meal, which for Blake it was always chicken fingers and fries. So we were guaranteed we were getting that once a week. Was really cool because they never argued about what we were eating. I had good little eaters anyways, but it was like they got to look forward to their favorite meal. And, the other two kids didn't pick anything more healthy probably. So they got at least, but we always had other things in to augment their nutrition, of course. But yeah, so those were
Well, I
really,
think that, yeah, it goes back to what you're saying, is involve them in the conversation, right? Make them
yeah,
a part of it, part of the planning.
sure. I think it goes a long way. Hmm.
Okay, so this next one you touched on previously, so maybe we could go a little bit more deeper into early identification, why it's so crucial in improving outcomes, and what are some of the barriers that families face when seeking that identification.
Well, I don't think that we have a necessarily FASD or prenatal alcohol exposure informed system, social service delivery system. I don't think our physicians are as aware, or they don't recognize the prevalence rates quite as they are. I think those are definitely barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some resistance to moving forward in that. Um, I think I think the nature of alcohol in our culture overall makes it difficult because people don't want to acknowledge that changes have to be made. And I don't believe that anybody intentionally harms their kids. I will tell you, I've worked nobody, there's no, but there is some resistance to understanding what those first few weeks look like and how to prepare for a pregnancy and the role of unplanned pregnancies. I think there's a resistance to acknowledge what may or may not be happening. And I can tell you, this is in my professional and my personal circle too. Like this is not, just it's everywhere. It's harder, So I mean, in terms of barriers, those are some of them. The value of screening and identifying, oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. Like it just takes so much pressure off both parents and caregivers and the individual. Like, I mean, when I worked at the diagnostic clinic, there were a few biological families that came in, and one young adolescent, I'll never forget him. Like when he got the diagnosis, he looked at his mom, and I was worried, about how this was going to impact their dynamic because they were very close. And he just looked at her and said, "See, I'm not lazy. I'm not crazy. See?" And she looked at him and said, "See, I'm not a bad parent." And I mean, it brought me to tears, to see these people not blame, not be angry with each other, but be able to just move forward in a good way because that knowledge is power,
Yeah.
right? And so I just really do feel like it takes a load of pressure off and it clarifies for so many people. Now, there is some resistance and some anger and a grieving process that we can't deny either. That's all part of it. We have to be careful around that. But I'm working with a young woman in her 30s right now who, we parents family members came to me wondering about it, and I ended up giving the books to them to say, read it, see what you think, because it does go through the lifespan. Does any of this make sense? And they were overwhelmingly yes. And I said, okay, well then let her have a look at it and see
Mhm.
what she thinks. Talk to them about, yes, there was alcohol exposure, we were drinkers back then, we didn't know about, blah blah blah, and just introduce it in a good way. She read the book and she was weeping, and saying, my gosh, like this makes so much more sense to me now.
Wow.
And that awareness is just like she's thriving. She's doing so much better than just bouncing off of one bad relationship to one bad job to mental health services, hospital stays with another diagnosis, wrong medication. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's very powerful.
Mhm.
So early identify, like how early can it be identified? Like, is there research on that? Or like, I know it's not really one of our planned questions. I'm just curious. Because you go, you have a baby, they do the hearing test, they do that. Like, how early can we do this?
Well, that's really tricky. I mean, if there's facial features, that's one thing, right? But facial features only happen between day 18 and 21 following conception. So there's less than 10% have them.
Yeah.
That's not the golden ticket there. I think that you can monitor, if you have an adoption or a kidship care situation, I think you should be on alert, to be honest
Mhm.
with you. I think you should, and notice colicky babies, notice babies that have trouble eating, notice babies who don't have a difficult time soothing, notice babies who don't sleep overly well, maybe they oversleep or undersleep, notice when speech takes a little bit longer. Notice with, I just find it really fascinating how we normalize behaviors in young people. The average 3-year-old does not walk outside of the house in the middle of the night, but we think, oh, that's just such a curious little boy, or that's a busy little, and the average person does not, you know, unlock a door or get a chair to get out, when they're told to go into wherever, right? So I think those things that we kind of normalize as parents because we just want to see this as this curious little kid or whatever. And I think high sensitivity too to transitions and change and that affect or that dysregulation, I think you can notice that really really early on. Now,
Mhm.
toddlers, I think, are the most fun, and I say that in my book too. And because the developmental range is so broad, and they're not expected to do much right on their own, they're just funny and fun, and so they might be a little pushy once in a while or whatever, but they're manageable, right? So, but I think that you know, most kids don't push other kids or punch them or want to hurt, look like they want
Yeah.
to hurt. So be careful around that. So I think we can do it. And the prognosis is better if it could be under 6, although diagnosing is hard under 6 because of the variances within the developmental stages. It is harder.
Yeah.
Uh, but I notice, and there's not a lot of research on this, but like enuresis and encopresis is something that can be a real problem. So late potty training and sleeping through not being able to get up in the night. And I believe my theory on this is that sensory processing is really often compromised. So lots of times kids will run outside without a jacket on and they don't care. We're worried about them having a jacket on, but they don't feel temperature the way we do, or they take a little bit longer to catch up sometimes. Not everybody, but some. And I've had some that can, I've had one child walk home with a broken ankle and not feel it, right? So there's those things that are just odd, right? That are different, and I think they need to be written down or journaled or whatever, so that when you put them all together, and
Mhm.
I'm there doing a developmental history with you, then things become a little bit more clear, right?
Right. And you're seeing it as a whole as opposed to just these individual
Right.
moments. Yeah.
Because individually, yeah, I mean, everybody knows a kid who has a little bit late speaking, right?
Right.
Or potty training or something like that. But anyways, what I was going to say is that one of the parents that told me that her son could feel this but not feel the bottom of his leg, but that would flip during the day. Like sometimes he could feel this and then
Mm.
not. So I guess what I'm saying is that lots of times kids can't feel the need to go pee and poop like we do either. If you can't feel out here the same,
Yeah.
inside doesn't work the same way either, right? So anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all great points. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time because as predicted, we're not getting through all the questions, but there are a couple questions I do want to get to. So specifically how, if people want to reach out to you, they want to learn more, maybe they want to get a copy of the book, what's the best way for people to do that? And I can put links in the chat later. So
My website is probably the best place. It's got
yeah.
contact on it. It's got links to both the ebook and then I'm just very excited. I haven't done the book launch yet, but it's just gone live to Amazon now. So there are paper copies that are available through
Amazing.
be delivered right to your door. So, and there's an opportunity to buy bulk if you have a group or something where you want to buy more at a reduced price. So that's something that we can discuss as well. And you just fill out a form and send it to us, and we'll get that going.
Perfect. So I'll put the link in for the website, and that way you can just click there and go straight to Amazon, or if you want to contact Angela for more information, you will have all the information at your fingertips. I just want to, I know it's 1 o'clock, but I do want to just keep this question. So last November, well, every November we run a campaign centered around adoption awareness. This past one, we focused on language matters. So why the words we choose matter, the context of the words, and how that can change over time. So I know this is a big question to ask in a limited time frame, but in your opinion, in the context of neurodiversity and specifically maybe talking about FASD, are there words that we should be re-examining or even maybe removing from our everyday speak? Or if you don't want to go that way, maybe there's words that we should be promoting and using more.
Well, I don't like, the focus on behavior, for one thing. I think we should avoid that as much as possible, because to me, behavior implies that we can change it or we can better manage it. And I'm not suggesting that we can't over time, but it implies a level of control. Whereas if we focus on neurodevelopmental rather than neurobehavioral, I think there's a bit of a different message that gets sent. And we need to focus on the fact that this is a brain-based issue. This is an organic issue, not just a result of poor parenting or poor choices, right?
Yeah.
That's really, really important. I think that the focus, should be on dignity. So I think everybody needs to, that's why I called the book, again, A Complicated and Beautiful Brain. It's like, fetal alcohol disorder has an inherent bias.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying we don't need to use that word, because we do. We need to make sure that people are aware and all of that stuff. So I'm not saying that. But rather than focusing on the disability or the disorder, can we talk about it as a condition? And can we talk about it with an ability to explore what this is all about, and the many strengths and the gifts that people do have, and the successes that people can experience? So those are the things that I would do. And then I also think that I just want to throw in that if we think about how we support our elderly who might be experiencing some cognitive decline, and I use inconsistent memory rather than lying or you're wrong, right? It's like, I just think we need to reevaluate how often we correct our young people. And let's just not, right? Let's just not, unless we have to make sure they feel safe. So in other words, if they tell you that their teacher hit them, then you validate the feelings that must be alongside that, but then you go and investigate with your child to make sure that he or she feels very safe in that environment, trusting that your teacher probably didn't hit him, right? But it doesn't matter if he hits him, because if he feels or believes he was hit, he's scared, and he's responding with that same response, right? Like that trauma is not necessarily accurate. It's how you perceive it. Those things are very critical. I don't know if that answers your question as well.
I think it does. It does beautifully. So thank you for that. And so we're going to leave it there because I want to respect everybody's time. And I know this is a subject that we could keep talking about, because there's, I know for you it's a passion, and for us too, it's a topic that we like to have at the forefront of our discussions always. So, well, actually, next week, maybe you want to tune in. Nancy Lockwood is going to be my guest, and we're going to talk about support for older caregivers of adults with FASD. So we're going to keep talking about FASD, but for older caregivers, and a new support group that she's starting up. So
I'm going to be doing some more training for more social workers and child and youth workers. And I think I'm going to be putting in, like, even if it's a monthly drop-in for parents and caregivers too, to be able to ask some of these questions, because I kind of get the feeling that there's more people out there that have more, that want more time with me, that I don't know.
That precious time.
We need more time, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to thank you. Thank you for your time today. And thank you for watching, whether you're watching live or replay. If you put your question and your comment in the chat, I'll be getting back to you as soon as I can. And like I said, if you want to check out the book, order the book from Amazon. The link is in the chat as well. We'll say goodbye for now, and have a great week, and take care of yourselves.
Excellent. Thanks. Bye, guys.